It was a good week for the Whalen Corp. Not such a great week for the Erickson interests. We break down week 2 coming up next on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Jeff Erickson. He's Nick Whalen. It has been a busy, turbulent week, too, and a lot to talk about here. Nick, busy time. How was your weekend personally before we start getting into your professional rooting interests?
Fantastic weekend overall. Had a wedding with some college friends in Madison on Friday. So, a large swath of our group of friends from college, made the pilgrimage back to Madison for that. Had a great time on Friday. Watched the Badgers destroy what I think was maybe the worst FBS team I've ever seen in my life on Saturday, New Mexico State. Really put up no fight whatsoever. Not a ton of takeaways from that one, but a nice bounce back for Wisconsin, which, of course, lost to Washington State last week. And then we saw what I think was maybe the most complete Jaguars game in like 4 years yesterday. Yeah. I could not believe what I saw. Obviously, Indianapolis down a couple receivers, was completely overmatched. And the Jags just, hit them with an avalanche in that game, 24-0. They've completely owned the Colts over the last few years. They've won 8 in a row over Indianapolis now at Jacksonville. And then, my more hometown team, the Green Bay Packers, I think took care of business last night. It wasn't flashy. I think it went about like most Packers fans expected. They did cover that large 10-point spread, but still some pretty significant concerns, I think, about that Green Bay offense. But man, I know we're going to talk Bengals at some point. I told you on this show, exactly a week ago that I felt better about the Bengals coming off of their week 1 loss to Pittsburgh, just based on how well they were able to move the ball. We saw a completely different Bengals offense against Dallas yesterday. So my condolences. I cannot believe that the Bengals are 0-2. This is not what I expected.
I think the Super Bowl hangover is real.
I guess so.
But it's more than that too. It's one thing to say you fixed the offensive line, and I thought they had, but that's by name only. Lyle Collins was not an improvement. He absolutely was not an improvement. He was getting beat. Now, granted, Micah Parsons makes a lot of people look bad, but it wasn't just mere look bad. It was like in a shell of itself, calling stupid plays because of the fear of Micah Parsons. That whole let's not block him play let's get that one out of the playbook there. But then it's like 3rd and 14, and they're throwing immediate checkdowns to Samaje Perine. Who's Samaje Perine? Yeah, you got to get your playmakers involved. And then, you have this stud field goal kicker, and you're punting from like the Dallas 42. I mean, I just get so angry thinking about this game. It turns out those 3 points could have been helpful too, but as it turns out, it's really bad. I'm really not a happy camper right now, but so it goes. The season waits for no one. The good news is the Bengals are only 1 game out. The Ravens lost, the Browns lost, and the Steelers lost, so it's not canceling yet. But man, it's not going to get easy either.
No, it's not. I mean, I think especially this one hurts because of the Cooper Rush situation. We saw the spread swing I think it was 9 points by the end of it in favor of Cincinnati. After this one opened as Dallas being the slight favorites back in May. I think, for most Bengals fans, I think you're a little more grounded than a lot of fans, but I think most people are like, all right, easy win. Dallas looked terrible with Dak Prescott last week. They're going to be even worse with Cooper Rush. And for one, Cooper Rush looked pretty good. He's kind of doing some glorified game management, but, got up over 230 yards. Had significantly more yards than Joe Burrow in this game. And more importantly, Dallas was able to protect Cooper Rush. Not that he needed all this time to sit back there and throw it deep, but 6 sacks for Joe Burrow after having 7 sacks last year. 13 sacks through 2 weeks. That is easily the most of any quarterback in the league. And watching that game, there could have been more. How many times is Joe Burrow kind of sitting back there? He gets flushed and all of a sudden he's running, he's diving, he's sliding. Not really things that you want your star quarterback who's already had some injury issues early in his career. You don't want him feeling like he has to do that. So,
he's got happy feet right now.
It very easily could have been more than 6 sacks is the point. And, Cincinnati, they won the time of possession battle. It kind of didn't really feel like it. They just had some long drives that, there was a 19-play drive late in the game that finally resulted in a touchdown. But this is not the result that I expected. Dallas being able to score a little bit, that's not shocking to me. Maybe they were due for a bounce back after week 1, but I thought this is a game that Cincinnati could put up 30 plus pretty easily. And, some credit goes to Dallas, of course, for that defense and that pass rush. But I just couldn't believe, that we saw Jamar Chase only have 5 catches, and T. Higgins is active for this game. And he did have the only touchdown, but it just was not the Bengals offense that I was expecting to see. And it looked a lot different from the unit that, again, was unable to close out drives last week, but was still moving the ball at will on Pittsburgh.
Yeah. I don't know about at will. Because they got smashed in the first half of that one too. They moved the ball late. But again, it was just like anytime they had to, teams are taking away the downfield plays. I mean, it's Burrow is getting the Mahomes treatment this year, where he's facing a lot of 2 deep safeties, and the pass rush is getting home. And the problem is the other teams, the Cowboys don't have to blitz that much to get to them. That's the real problem. If you can cover with 7 and rush with 4 and get to them, that's a real problem. And the deep plays aren't going to be open that much. Chase, the crossing patterns will be there every once in a while, but teams are wise to that. I don't think all's dead yet, but man, they got to fix that line. And last week it was the left side. It was Jonah Williams. It was the rookie, Cordell Vinson version. I'll get the name right next time we talk about him, but not a first round rookie, not like this highly touted guy. He won the battle though for the left guard spot. This week, it was the right tackle, Lyle Collins, getting just owned, and there's pressure up the middle a lot too. I think the only player that's not getting crushed right now is the center. And that's really a problem. So yeah, lots of reason to be concerned here. Mixon got banged up in this one a little bit late too. Came back in there, but that's going to be something to watch in practice on Wednesday. They pathologically will not use Chris Evans. Okay, pathologically is probably a strong term for it there, but especially again, this is me sitting in my chair thinking that Evans has this upside and needs to get some work. He didn't get a single offensive snap in the first week. It's pretty clear to the Bengals. P. Ryan is the backup and the top backup. Hey, Chris Evans, achievement unlocked, got in an offensive snap last week. I think that was probably after Mixon was banged up a little bit there, but they need, and who knows, Evans might not be able to block a lick. And if he can't, then he can't be in there. I know even Mixon struggled with little blitz pickup a little bit when he was in, and that's why Mixon comes out on 3rd down too, by the way. And I like to gnash my teeth and say, why is P. Ryan in there? Well, if P. Ryan can block a little bit better than Mixon, then so be it. But that's the way it goes. There wasn't a whole lot of fun stuff to talk about. The Bengals, they forced their first turnover in the second half on that fumble. They missed a couple of chances on picks. On that final drive, Dallas got a little lucky. There's a tip ball that went in the direction of a receiver after that, and they got a first down after that, got in the field goal position. It wasn't the play that got him in the field goal position. It was the play before that. I think it was the penultimate play. But yeah, it was all around. But, when you need to rely on tip ball luck at the end of the game against a team not starting their starting quarterback, that's your sign that, hey, that you need to do better.
It was a jarring departure from last week. And maybe you're right to say, they weren't moving the ball at will against Pittsburgh, but it was, turnover after turnover after turnover. And they're consistently able to at least, get over midfield or threaten for a field goal. And, so many of those drives ended in fluky plays in week 1, but you just got the sense that especially, by the time we got to the second half, like Joe Burrow and the rest of that offense, it looked like they knew that whatever they were running on 3rd and 9, it just wasn't going to work, whether it ended in a sack or, like you said, these, repeated checkdowns, you need 9 yards, you're throwing to Jamar Chase for 4 yards. It just looked like the plays were doomed before they even ran them. So it was a weird day for Cincinnati. Everything was difficult, even, every little 3-yard gain felt like, you're just, it took a total team effort just to generate a 3-yard gain. And, we kind of saw a similar situation for Joe Mixon, a relatively inefficient day in week 1 against Pittsburgh. He goes 19 for 57 with a long of only 10 in this game against Dallas. So I'm still not out on the Cincy offense. I still think on their best day, they could score with anybody. The Higgins, Chase, Tyler Boyd trio is as good as any top 3 in the league. It was just really, really jarring to see this Dallas defense handle Joe Burrow and the Bengals offense the way that it did. But I think, maybe we just need to give a lot of credit to this Dallas defense, because
I agree with that.
They did similar things to Tampa Bay last week. And look, I mean, the Tampa Bay offense has 2 touchdowns through 2 weeks. So maybe that's not a stellar unit either. But, we saw Dallas's defense kind of keep them in that game when the offense was giving them absolutely nothing in week 1.
I think that's 100% correct. And Dallas, their chances not dead yet to win the division because of the defense. And because, I mean, we'll see what happens with Philly tonight, but Philly's actually the threat too, but I don't think the Giants are going to run away from it. I know the Giants are 2-0 now, but and the Commanders did lose to the Lions. So, that helps them a little bit there too. Good. It was a good day to be a Cowboys fan for sure. Pollard actually was a little bit more involved for the Cowboys. After being kind of an afterthought in the first game, a lot more involved in the second game here.
Yeah, had a big run toward the end of that game to help set Dallas up. I thought he was running really, really well. On a day where Ezekiel Elliott just kind of gave you, I think, exactly what we expected from Zeke in a game like this. 15 for 53. They kept trying it. There wasn't much there. But as usual, as has been the case for the last 2 or 3 years, they're going to keep slanting the workload in favor of Zeke for reasons unknown. But Tony Pollard consistently looks like the more explosive between the two.
Yeah, and that's right. He got the touchdown in that one there. Neither were really involved in the passing game. Zeke had 2 targets. Pollard had 7. I take that back. Pollard was, I looked at the wrong line. Pollard 4 for 55 with 7 targets. That's actually pretty good. CD Lamb, a little bit better, 7 for 75 on 11 targets. You're not going to find too many downfield stuff, but he had a big catch on that drive to get in field position there. Noah Brown was the revelation in this one here, 5 for 91.
Yeah, Noah Brown quietly had a couple of huge catches in this game for Dallas. And, going back to CD Lamb, I feel like this is almost the best case scenario based on how we were talking about CD coming into this week. I mean, as a potential, do you even feel good starting him anymore? Yep. Obviously, you'd prefer that he get into the end zone, but 7 for 75, with Cooper Rush at quarterback. I think if you had told any CD Lamb owner earlier this week, hey, if you start him, this is what you're getting, I think pretty much everybody would have taken that.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So there's not too much more to unlock from this game. Bengals need to fix their offensive line. Dallas only allowed 1 sack. That was huge. Those are big things. That's pretty big as well. Let's move on because I'm sick of talking about my Bengals. Let's talk about the most. There's 2 very big, compelling games here right off the top. We'll talk Miami, Baltimore first. Miami, what a comeback. I mean, crazy. 28 points in the fourth quarter. I got to ask you, Nick, are you still a Tua hater?
I think I kind of have to be. I can't flip-flop that quickly. But, man, I mean, I'm writing my reactions column right now. I was working on it prior to hopping on here. And, I mean, this is pretty easily the defining game of Tua's career, right? I don't even know what would be number 2. 6 touchdowns, huge second half. A lot of this game was on red zone. As I was watching yesterday, so I didn't see every single play, but the one thing I guess if you want to pick nits with Tua is a lot of these big plays that he was hitting were just unbelievable broken coverages by the Ravens. When you have a 3 touchdown lead late in the game, the one thing you're preaching to your defense is, hey, don't let the 2 fastest receivers in the league get behind you. And Kyle Hamilton, the rookie out at Notre Dame, was lost on a couple of plays. Great throws by Tua. He deserves the credit, but I mean, he's literally just hitting a guy in stride who has 10 yards, between him and a defender. But nonetheless, I mean, 469 yards, 6 touchdowns, did have the 2 picks early on, did Tua. But I mean, this was one that the other one I assume you're hinting at is the Jets and the Browns.
Right.
I mean, these are 2 games that were dead and buried. When you're talking about the latter portion of that early window, you start looking ahead to the late window. Maybe you stepped away. I snuck out and mowed my lawn for a little bit yesterday. Maybe you're making some food. All of a sudden you come back and the Ravens, are hanging on for dear life. And it just, you kind of started to get that avalanche feel where, the key play, I think for me was the Ravens had that 4th and 1 on the Miami 40 and got stuffed there. And you just knew oh boy, Miami is absolutely getting a touchdown here. And of course they did. Then you force a quick 3 and out, another quick touchdown for Miami and we're off and running. But I mean, to me, this was more about, how concerned are you about this Baltimore secondary? Because, right now they lead the league in terms of yards and passing yards allowed by a huge margin through 2 weeks. And part of that is Joe Flacco threw the ball 59 times last week. So that one to me is a little bit of an anomaly. But, I mean, to basically give up 3 scoring drives in kind of the exact same way against this Dolphins team when you absolutely need to stop. All you need to do is get one stop and the game's basically over. And the fact that this defense couldn't do it, to me, I mean, that's pretty concerning. And, Tua deserves some respect, but this isn't Patrick Mahomes doing this to you.
Yeah. Well, there again, offensive line matters. 1 sack for Tua. Yeah. I mean, they didn't really pressure him a ton. Lamar didn't get sacked at all, by the way. So you can see, hence 42-38. I mean, this was a Big 12 game, basically. And that happens. But yeah, as you alluded to, Flacco averaged like 5.5 yards per attempt. So the total yardage thing doesn't bother me as much. But yeah, I think when you got a young secondary too, a guy like Hamilton, he's going to learn. It's good. There's going to be some growing pains. You're going up against the hardest single receiver to cover. I think. Well, Devontae Adams is probably the hardest single receiver to cover. Maybe Jefferson, but Tyreek Hill's very high on that list. Lots of volume for both Hill and Waddle. You like seeing that if you invest in both of them, thinking, okay, it's going to be one or the other, especially if you had Waddle and you were worried a little bit because Waddle, had 1 catch before halftime. It happened to be on that 4th down play. And that went for the touchdown. But yeah, this allays some of those fears is because he scored early too in that one also.
19 targets for Jalen Waddle. Yeah, I mean, 13 for Tyreek Hill. So, 22 of Tua's 50 attempts going to those 2 guys. I think at this point, Hill and Waddle, I think you have to consider them the best wide receiver duo in the league. I think Chase and Higgins maybe have something to say about that. I think Keenan Allen and Mike Williams maybe have something to say about that. But in terms of production, I mean, this is we'll have to look back on Football Reference or go in StatHead and see. I mean, how many times have multiple receivers had 10+ catches, 170+ yards, 2+ touchdowns? I would say there's a good chance that that's never happened before. These guys were the 2 top scorers in PPR this week. To have that coming on the same team, obviously Tua and Lamar Jackson were the 2 highest scorers at quarterback. I mean, this is something that you rarely see and likely won't see again this year. But like you said, I think for Waddle, you come away from this game extremely encouraged to see him getting 19 targets. And like you said, the 171 yards. But the other thing too, Mike Gesicki kind of back.
He lives
4 for 41, did have a touchdown in this game. More importantly, he won the snap battle against Durham Smythe, who kind of wiped him in that category last week. So not quite dead yet. I still don't feel great about Gesicki. I mean, if you abandon him after week 1, I don't think you're going to rue the day that you cut Mike Gesicki, but still encouraging to see him a lot more involved in this game.
Yeah, that's right. He's the tight end who lives. Even got a touchdown on that one there. Running backs, though, we got an issue with that. Both sides. Let's talk on Miami side first. FBA says, I just dropped Chase Edmunds for Garrett Wilson. Thoughts? I mean, Garrett Wilson is obviously, he showed his upside yesterday. He needs to be rostered, clearly. Chase Edmunds, you got to be disappointed. He lost the snap battle to Mostert. Mostert was getting most of the work early on in this one. Edmunds during the comeback was on the field a little bit more, but still only 1 catch, only 3 targets. I thought it was going to be a Chase Edmunds type of fit on this offense. At least yesterday it was more Mostert than Edmunds. Thoughts there?
Yeah, from what I've seen so far, Edmunds leads the league in plays that you think are going to go for 25 yards, and then he gets tackled. Like, you think he's about to break a tackle, and then he goes down for like a 6-yard gain. Like, he absolutely passes the eye test, but he just can't. He can never break that one last tackle that's preventing him from ripping off a big play. He did have a 28-yarder in this game, but that also means that his other 4 carries basically went nowhere. I mean, he has like 15.5 fantasy points through two weeks.
So it's a real problem.
Pretty concerning on Edmunds. I mean, I don't know if he's quite in cut territory for me quite yet. I think based on where you're drafting him, there's still reasonable hope here. But yeah, losing the snap count to Raheem Mostert, that is very concerning. And to only have 3 targets out of the backfield for Edmunds, obviously that's a big part of the appeal with him. I think if we see that for 1 more week, then maybe you have to consider cutting bait. But for me, there's still enough to like with Chase Edmunds that I'm not making that drastic of a move quite yet.
I hear you on that. I think you're right. My on the Baltimore side, the running backs are just a huge, gigantic mess. They can't convert short yardage. They're not getting carries even. They obviously need J.K. Dobbins back. If you take away Lamar's carries, which you don't take away Lamar's carries because Lamar went nuts, 9 for 119. But the running backs went 16 for 16 for 36. Not great, yards. Bob. Not great.
Well, that was the case last week too against the Jets. I think that to me is what's more concerning, that this has happened 2 weeks in a row.
And 0 catch, by the way.
Also. Exactly. I think this offense has done a great job hitting long shot plays through the air. I mean, that's what carried them against the Jets in week 1. They hit a 75-yarder to Bateman in this one. With Devin Duvernay returned the opening kick, Lamar Jackson had almost an 80-yard touchdown run. Like, again, this is one of those just unbelievably unlikely scenarios. Like, how often do you have that many big plays? The Ravens didn't even turn it over, I don't think. And still ended up losing this game despite being +2.
No sacks,
in the
no
turnover battle. Yeah, like you said, no sacks. You get the kick return. I mean, just an unbelievably unlikely set of events. But yeah, this running game, I think Lamar Jackson is kind of the bandage that you look at. You say, 25 for 155. That's pretty good. Yeah, well, I mean, a huge chunk of that came on one run for Lamar. He looked much better this week than he did last week on the ground. But yeah, they are not clearing any holes for those running backs. And to me, it doesn't seem like a situation that just like a slight upgrade in talent is going to solve. Like, I don't think J.K. Dobbins coming in all of a sudden is going to completely turn around the Ravens running game. I think they have some blocking issues more than some running back talent issues.
Yep. No turnovers, only 1 penalty for 5 yards for Baltimore. They just couldn't stop the Dolphins when they needed to get a stop. That's really all this came down to. And they need a running back. And Dobbins had practices all last week. I thought he was going to go, and then it started coming out of the weekend and he wasn't going to go. And sure enough, he was a scratch again. I think that's a big difference for this offense. I really think they need that extra playmaker. Before we move on to the next game, let's get a quick note from our Blue Wire sponsors on the Blue Wire Network. All right, every RotoWire fantasy podcast is hosted on the Blue Wire Network, and we thank them for that. Let's move on to let's hit up this question from Drew. He says, would you guys trade DeAndre Swift and Mike Evans for Joe Mixon, T. Higgins, and Christian Kirk? Interesting, because you're buying low on Mixon and Higgins, obviously, here. Swift is looking great. Evans, until he started brawling, he did his thing a little bit there. The Bucs obviously need him with all the receiver carnage that they have right now. Christian Kirk looks fantastic so far. Proving the Jaguars right that he's worth that contract. What do you think, Nick?
I think this is actually a really even trade. I don't feel too strongly about either side. You have to keep in mind that, for one, Mike Evans could very likely be suspended for at least one game. So, regardless of whether he's on your team or you trade him away, he might not be available for week 3. So that's something to keep in mind. With DeAndre Swift, I think the one thing that's a little concerning as far as the touchdown production so far is that Jamal Williams continues to outpace him as the short yardage back, as the goal line back. We saw him vulture a pair of touchdowns in week 1. I mean, so far Swift has subsisted on some huge plays, whether it's out of the backfield or catching the ball. And that's just probably not going to be sustainable over the course of 17 games. I think the workload could still be there, but you can't be relying on him ripping off, these huge runs. He had like a 50-yard play yesterday as well. So, to me, I think I would take the 3 over the 2. I would do that trade. I would rather have Mixon, Higgins, and Kirk. I think Swift is, as of now, probably the best player in the deal. Sometimes you don't want to be trading away the best guy, but I think the other 3 are all fairly comparable talents.
If you have to assume a little bit of improvement out of the Bengals offense, I think,
yes, 100%.
This trade to work. So yes, I think I'd do it too, but a little bit of trepidation there because Swift was on a snap count yesterday. He won't always be in that case, but anywho. All right, let's move on to Jets and the Browns. This game was salted. This should have been salted away. I do not blame Nick Chubb for scoring. I think that is absolutely terrible analysis there to even suggest that when you're going to go up 2 scores, there's still 2 minutes left in the game. All you have to, Cleveland had a blown coverage. You talk about, can't let guys get behind you. I mean, the Browns just had a completely botched coverage, then a botched recovery on an onside kick, like as if they weren't expecting it.
Yeah.
It was mind-boggling there. I can't blame Nick Chubb at all. Nick Chubb was a stud in this game. And so was Amari Cooper. They got that part fixed there, but Cleveland they botched this game. They let Flacco throw all over him for 4 touchdowns and 307 yards. Flacco has thrown the ball 103 times so far this year. I don't think you too many people had that going as the dynamic on this team.
Yeah, leading the league easily through 2 weeks in attempts. No other players even to 90 attempts thus far. So, yeah, the Flacco rate offense alive and well through 2 weeks. Flacco yeah, you're right. I'm with you on the Nick Chubb thing. That is such a revisionist argument. I didn't see anyone saying he should have slid until the Jets came all the way back and won the game. I'm all for punching that in. You're going up 2 scores. I think what no one else is talking about is that they also missed the extra point after that, which turned out to be pretty huge. I think you make that extra point. This argument is completely different. But yeah, to me, I would comfortably be up. I'd rather be up 2 scores in that situation, not risk something fluky happening, as you're trying to slide out and waste time at the end of the game.
Right.
And then, all you have to do, like you said, is just not give up an immediate 7-yard touchdown to Corey Davis, who was just, no one around him whatsoever. Again, I don't know what is going on in that defensive huddle where, what is your concern at that point other than having someone not get behind you? I think that was even more egregious than some of the plays that we saw in the Baltimore game, especially because it's Corey Davis and it's not Tyreek Hill. It's not Jalen Waddle. Like, this isn't exactly a guy who you should be burning past your safeties and your corners. So, I mean, that was egregious. But even then, you're like, okay, whatever. We give up this fluky touchdown. All we got to do, recover the onside kick, and we're fine. Of course, they don't do that. I agree. They didn't look ready for it. I mean, it was kind of a little bit of one of those like misdirection kicks where it looked like they were going to kick it right. And it was a great kick by whoever the Jets onside kicker is. But Amari Cooper had a chance to recover that. Didn't really go after it.
No,
as aggressively as somebody who's on the hands team should. He kind of backed off at the last second. It was almost
a business decision on an onside kick for the game. And they still had to score after that too, by the way. It wasn't like they were immediately in the red zone. They still had to go the length of, half the field there to get a touchdown. Not even settle for a field goal. I mean,
100%.
I used the Browns defense in a lot of places. I'm like, okay, they get Carolina and they get the Jets. Steelers in week 3 and another good matchup in week 4. Questioning these choices. Joe Flacco, no interceptions, 2 sacks. They did lose a fumble, but this is not what I paid for. I paid for a lot more than this.
Yeah, ridiculous. I mean that last drive, 9 plays. It's not like this was some other fluky drive. Like the Browns defense just got punked on that last drive. They didn't even force a 3rd down until the final touchdown play deep in the red zone to Garrett Wilson. And then of course, the Browns still had time. And Jacoby Brissett, throws just an awful interception when it looked like they maybe, they were 1 more play away from at least getting an attempt at a long field goal and maybe pulling that off for the 2nd straight week to move to 2-0. But yeah, this was just a complete blown game by the Cleveland Browns. And, I think you look back on this one and Jacoby Brissett didn't lose him the game. He did have that bad pick late, but at that point, the game was essentially in hand. He was 22 of 27. Nick Chubb had a great game. You don't expect the defense to let you down against the New York Jets.
Right. They scored 30 points, excuse me.
Yeah,
30 points should have been sufficient against the Jets, but it wasn't. Anonymous asked, what about Breece Hall? Wrong one. Sorry. Breece Hall. Will he take over the RB1 role? I thought early on it looked like he was on that path. He got a lot of work early. He looked good. He was 7 for 50, had a 23-yard run in there, but he got 7 carries. Michael Carter had 7 carries. Carter got a lot more targets. Hall only had the 1 target, 1 catch for 10 yards. I mean, it's still it's just a timeshare. Part of the thing is Michael Carter's good. I mean, that it's not like he's, he's not Rex Burkhead blocking Dameon Pierce. I think that if to try to use something there. So, yeah, I think that it's going to be a timeshare for a while. I think this is going to. I think Hall is the better back between the two in terms of a runner. But I think Carter's a better pass catcher. Last week's drop notwithstanding.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a really frustrating situation for the next several weeks, probably indefinitely, unless one of these guys gets injured. And the other thing too is, we saw Ty Johnson kind of sneak his way into the mix as well. He was on the field a lot late in this game. I think he had like 6 snaps during the last second drive for the Jets.
Yeah,
he played 13 snaps overall. Breece Hall played 20 snaps, so he wasn't all that far behind. And then Michael Carter was at 42. So even though the carries, ended up being equal between Carter and Hall, and Ty Johnson, for the record, is essentially a passing down guy, ran 11 routes on his 13 snaps, did not have a carry. But Breece Hall, 7 carries on 20 snaps. Michael Carter, 7 carries on 42 snaps. So some good and some bad there, I guess, depending on how you want to look at it. But if you're a Breece Hall owner, not ideal that he's being outsnapped by more than double.
Yeah, it's really bad. Really bad. Before we move on to the next game, we talked about the Dolphins earlier. Jay was asking about keep Edmunds or drop him. I'd keep him still. I think there'll be better games, especially in the passing game for him there. That's where I think he really contributes. Let's roll on to the instant classic that was Patriots and the Steelers.
This one lived up to the ugliness, 100%.
Yes. When the big highlight of the day is a muffed punt, which went off former Patriot Olszewski's helmet and led to the go-ahead touchdown. That's your lead highlight from this game. That tells you all you need to know.
Yeah, as somebody who at one point in my life, the coaches attempted to make me a punt returner in like 8th grade. I deeply identified with the ball banging off of Olszewski's face mask. Obviously, much harder to catch punts than it looks. I've had that happen to me a number of times. But yeah, that was the key play. I mean, these teams, they were just remarkably similar teams on offense. I think this is pretty much what we expected. But I mean, that first half especially was just so sloppy. And they had the long one to Aguilar on an amazing catch by him that really ended up kind of being the decider and put New England in control for most of the second half. But even that, I mean, it was a good throw by Mac Jones, but that was 100% Aguilar just going up and getting that. I mean, that's kind of a 50-50 ball. It's not like it was really a great play. It was kind of a heave by Mac Jones, who had already thrown a pick at that point. But I don't have a lot of takeaways here. I mean, I was struggling to come up with things for my article on this game. And, it was kind of the typical Najee Harris, super inefficient, 5 for 49 on the ground with a long of 8.
15 for 49.
15, excuse me, for 49 with a long of 8. I did think Damian Harris looked really good.
Yeah.
Luckily, it looked like he maybe injured his knee at the end of the game, but turns out, according to him at least, that knee is fine per his post-game comments. But prior to that, I mean, he brought this game home single-handedly for New England.
Yeah. I remember, do you remember back in training camp when they were talking about Ramondre's getting all the passing down snaps and he's working with the first team? And he ran okay. He ran well himself, 9 for 47, but Stevenson only got 2 targets. Harris got 2 targets. I mean, I was thinking maybe Ty Montgomery out. Maybe you'd see someone else jump in. No, that wasn't the case. I'm worried if Devontae Parker got shut out completely, 2 targets, and that's it. Nelson Aguilar had that catch, and he went 6 for 110. He only had those 6 targets. Jacoby Myers is getting all the short passes. I mean, you're much happier if you're a Pats fan right now. Obviously, not only did you get the win, but you had little things that were working. I mean, the Pittsburgh offense is just a big mess right now.
I mean, pound for pound, it might be the worst offense in the league so far. I think there's a lot of talent on this offense compared to some of the other bad offenses, but in terms of just pure execution, there's no team that just looks like it's grinding for every single yard more than the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, Mitch Trubisky was at like 5 yards per attempt in this game, 21 completions for 168. I mean, if you're a Claypool or a Pickens owner, full on panic mode at this point. Like, it seems like Deontay Johnson is like talented enough that he can make a few like insane catches per game just to salvage a decent fantasy line. It was kind of the same story for him this week as last week, but the passing offense is so bad that you can barely sustain one receiver. You certainly can't sustain Claypool and Pickens. I mean, George Pickens has 2 catches through 2 weeks. Chase Claypool, that he had
6 targets through 2 weeks too, by the way, for Pickens. That's it. 3 and 3.
Yeah, it's not ideal if you're a Pickens owner. I mean, he's obviously like unstartable at this point. With Claypool, he salvaged an okay week 1 because he had those 6 carries. Like, they were just searching for anything to get offense against Cincinnati. Didn't have a single carry in this game. I think we knew that wouldn't be sustainable. But 4 for 26 for him on 6 targets. Like, he's not really startable at all. The Pittsburgh offense, I mean, with Najee Harris, given the level of investment, you're going to be starting him every week. But I think it's going to be a grind like this for him week in and week out. I saw a good note. PFF had this. He has 25 carries so far this year, Najee Harris, and he's only gained 10 yards before contact on 25 carries.
Ugh. That's not great. That's not
awful.
Great.
Awful. I mean, there's just no running holes whatsoever. And I mean, the nice thing is when you're in a terrible, offense that can't throw the ball downfield, you can rely on a bunch of checkdowns, but even those aren't really going for big yardage.
Yeah, that's right. So, Yeah, not much more to say about that game except I'm not looking forward to that rewatch. I'll tell you that much.
No.
I might delay on that one there. Maybe I should rip off the Band-Aid and get it done and over with right now.
Yeah, that might be one to throw in like 2x if you can speed it up. I do have a couple notes on the tight ends. Pat Freiermuth.
Yep.
Again, it's ugly, but like he's like weirdly like a beneficiary of the offense being ugly.
Right.
He got in the end zone again. I think it's going to be sustainable. I think he could just have kind of a year that feels not all that remarkable, and then you look up and he's like the tight end 6 or 7 at the end of the year. I think he's the tight end 6 right now in PPR leagues through 2 weeks. My guy Hunter Henry, who I was just telling everybody to draft at the end of drafts, not looking good. Basically split snaps with Jonnu Smith. Actually lost the snap battle this week, 39-34. Only had 1 target. I still think there's going to be weeks where he could, kind of randomly pop for like 4 catches and 2 touchdowns. But yeah, week to week, that one's not looking great either.
No, it's not. It's just I'm looking for alternatives where I picked up Henry to place Kittle basically, and now I'm like, well, maybe Kittle will come back, and we'll get to that game, but significant ramifications going on there. Before we move on to our next game, quick note from our friends at BroThrow. Have you ever bet on sports with your buddies? BroThrow is the only sports betting platform that lets you bet directly with friends, and BroThrow doesn't take a cut of every bet. No fees, no juice, no middleman. BroThrow is not a sports book. You bet on sports directly against others with no juice or vig, which saves you a ton of money over time. Betting $11 to win 10 stinks. With BroThrow, you bet 10 to win 10. BroThrow offers a hassle-free sign-up process that lets you get in the action in seconds. And you don't have to deposit money on BroThrow either. Instead, you pay other bettors directly. Throw out your first bet and go to brothrow.com/roto and use code ROTO. BroThrow is free to sign up. Cut out the middleman and start betting on BroThrow. That's brothrow.com/roto. I'm here with Nick Whalen. We're talking about all the things that happened in a turbulent week 2 here. Let's move on from that scintillating Pats and Steelers matchup there. Instead, let's look at let's do something triumphant. Let's talk about the Jaguars. 24-0 win over the Colts. Hey, it's a good thing that the Colts fixed their QB woes and got a good, stable veteran in Matt Ryan, huh?
Oh, boy. Yeah, that was one of my calls for my week 1 picks article was that, in so many words, I basically said, Matt Ryan is the opposite of Carson Wentz. All those games that Carson Wentz kind of threw away by being reckless. At least, maybe Matt Ryan's not as great as he once was, but at least he's going to give you stability. Matt Ryan, 16 of 30, 195 yards, 3 picks in this game. The Jacksonville Jaguars, Jeff, through 2 weeks, an NFL best +5 turnover margin. They've had back-to-back interceptions on back-to-back plays in 2 straight weeks. Doing it to Carson Wentz last week and to Matt Ryan this week. I mean, the Colts moved the ball well on the opening drive. Looked like they were going to march towards at least a field goal try. And then Matt Ryan just uncorks a terrible throw on 3rd down. That was intercepted by Jenkins. And from then on, I mean, the onslaught began. I mean, the Colts just could do nothing on offense after that first drive. It was 3-and-out punt, 3-and-out punt, 3-and-out punt, 5-and-out punt on their next 4 drives to end the half. And at that point, it's 17-0. And with no receivers, essentially, it just felt like Indianapolis had no chance to throw itself back into this game.
Right. It showed they really missed Michael Pittman. We talked ad infinitum about how much there's a gap between Pittman and the rest of the wide receivers. Actually, I shouldn't say that. Ashton Doolin did step up a little bit. 5 for 79 on 7 targets, had a long of 39, but you can tell he was missed. I think, there should be a firing though here because Jonathan Taylor only got 9 carries. He got 1 target. He is your playmaker. How is he getting 10 touches in this game?
Yeah, I mean, we said it last week too. I mean, they faced kind of a similar game script where they're down 20-3 against Houston, and we gave credit to them for still using Jonathan Taylor to get back into that game. Jonathan Taylor ran and caught the Colts back into that game against the Texans. And I mean, as always, I thought he looked great. I mean, he's one of those guys that, most running backs, it's a 3-yard gain. With Taylor, it's a 6-yard gain. Like he's always getting the extra yards. But they went away from him. And, they, again, to do that in a game where you're down your top 2 receivers, Alec Pierce also was unavailable for this game, if we want to call him their number 2 receiver. I don't even know if that's true anymore. To kind of go away from that made no sense because they weren't getting anything through the air in this game. A couple plays where the Jags kind of fell asleep in the second half and let up some big gains. But I mean, it was also Matt Ryan, just when you throw back-to-back interceptions on drives where you're clearly pressing and you need points, it kind of sucked the life out of this offense. And I mean, we talked last week about Carolina only running 50 plays. Colts only ran 48 plays in this game. They only had 9 first downs. They were 2 of 10 on third down. They were 0 of 2 on fourth down. I mean, this was, I know not a lot of people probably watched this game start to finish like I did, but this was a thorough beatdown in pretty much every phase of the game. I thought the Jacksonville defense looks really, really good. But considerably underrated, especially after last week. Obviously that secondary had some issues against Washington, but this defensive line, I think, could be really, really good. We saw Josh Allen rack up 2 more sacks in this game. Trayvon Walker was a little more quiet than he was in week 1, but offensively, good game for the Jags. Defensively, they look a little further along than I expected. But I think the big takeaway that most people are going to be talking about is just how great Trevor Lawrence looked. I think Tua's going to steal the show as far as young quarterbacks and having big games in week 2. But this was also Trevor Lawrence's best game as a pro, bar none.
Protected the ball, 25 of 30. Not too many deep strikes, but didn't need to. Jacksonville actually didn't. I mean, they had one long run by James Robinson for 37 yards and the touchdown, but 37 for 96, 2.6 yards per carry. I mean, the Colts are a tough team to kind of crack in the running game. Yeah. Travis Etienne managers are obviously very unhappy today. Not as much work. But this is also one of those games where they didn't have to be too bold in the play calling either. I mean, when you're protecting a lead like that, they had the early 14-0 lead, and they just kind of salted it away after that. And they knowing that the Colts can't hurt you, they kind of put things in the cooler there. And I think there'll be better days for ETN. I'm not that panicked about this. I do acknowledge, though, that Robinson is the guy to start right now because, he's just getting the workload. He looks healthy. ETN's going to have to settle for a 40% share right now.
Yeah, I think at best. I mean, I think they're going to run Robinson, until something changes or he gets injured. Right. I mean, he is very clearly the guy. Like you said, 23-9 split in terms of carries. ETN, to me, continues to look like the vastly more explosive option, especially out of the backfield, catching the ball, but they just haven't really used him all that much. Maybe they haven't needed him quite yet. But they were pounding James Robinson over and over in this game. He broke off the 37-yard touchdown. Without that, the line doesn't look all that great. It still wasn't, even with that run, he was still under 3 yards per carry on the week. But I mean, here we are now 2 weeks into the year, and I know there's still 4 running backs or 4+ running backs yet to play tonight. But James Robinson is the 6th highest scoring running back in fantasy right now.
Pretty good. Pretty good. That's for sure. Christian Kirk looks every bit worth the money that the Jaguars spent and throwing off the wide receiver market as if teams weren't going to spend on wide receivers this offseason. That it's a funny narrative there. I mean, the fact is when you're Jacksonville, you kind of have to overpay. I mean, that's at least now you do. And maybe at least now you did. Now maybe in the future, if they get some winning seasons under the belt and you're like, hey, this is a team that's going somewhere, then maybe you can get someone to sign with you. But the fact is they had to overpay to get someone like Christian Kirk. And, he is the alpha on this offense. That's the one thing that's nice.
Yeah, no question about that. I know last week it seemed like Zay Jones had the leg up over Marvin Jones for that number 2 spot. I think that's just going to bounce back and forth week to week.
Agreed.
Probably not a lot of fantasy interest in either of those guys. But yeah, Christian Kirk is very, very clearly the featured option in this offense. And in one of his touchdowns yesterday, we even saw, they kind of used him out of the backfield on this kind of, it reminded me of like a Green Bay Packers type of play where they got guys moving all over. It was like a 1-yard little toss from Trevor Lawrence that he easily could have just ran in himself. So they're using Christian Kirk all over the field, in the slot, on the outside, in the backfield. And that's exactly what you want to see, if you're invested in Christian Kirk, who right now, I mean, we talked about James Robinson being a top 6 running back. Christian Kirk is 5th in PPR scoring right now through 2 weeks. And
2 touchdowns tend to help there. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, guys like Justin Jefferson and Stephon Diggs will likely pass him tonight, but either way, he's going to be a top 10 guy through the first 2 weeks. So great start for Christian Kirk. We also saw Evan Engram get involved a little bit here, 7 for 46. 8 targets, still wouldn't really touch him. I think he's one of those guys that if you're starting him, you're just praying that he gets in the end zone. I don't think he's going to really be a sustainable option.
I think he's a meat and potatoes guy. I think when you have if your starting tight ends hurt, I think he's going to get you, basic. He's going to get you 6 to 7 points on a week-to-week basis because I think he'll be regularly part of the offense. I don't think he's going to be a featured guy. And every once in a while, he's going to steal a touchdown. I think he's handy. Maybe not dynamic, but handy.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think he fits well in this offense. I'll say that. But anyway, enough Jags talk. Let's move on.
Yeah. Never enough Jags talk. All right. Carolina at the Giants, the G-men here. I mean, this was kind of an ugly game too.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it depends on your perspective, but Christian McCaffrey finally looked a lot better. Although, again, I'd like to see him used a little bit more often. 15 for 102 had that big, long 49-yard run. 4 of 5 targets in the passing game for 26 yards. Better. Not great, though. The problem is with Carolina, they're just not throwing the ball. Baker looks terrible.
Baker looks awful. And for the second straight week, they were just like massively disadvantaged in terms of time of possession. They only ran 54 plays in this game. I mean, you got other teams running like 80 plus plays. So with McCaffrey, hopefully this doesn't become a theme, but I kind of want to chalk it up yet again to the Panthers just didn't run that many plays. It's not like they're going away from him. They're not feeding another running back. We saw Deontay Foreman come in and have 2 carries, but it's not like McCaffrey is really splitting the workload with anybody. Right. They're just not moving the ball. When you're going 3 and out on half of your drives, you just don't have all that many opportunities. And Baker Mayfield, man, it's fun to have him in the league. Like, he's one of those guys that I like having him around. Like, there's always going to be storylines week to week. He's just somebody that you would never want quarterbacking the team that you root for.
No. We made some excuses for him. He's playing hurt last year. He's still probably better than Darnold, but I mean, man, talk about low bars to clear. It's not pretty. So honestly, and DJ Moore he's not getting unlocked. Robbie Anderson had 1 big blown coverage touchdown last week, had some target share last week, but back to 3 for 32 is 0 this week. I mean, it's just, like you said, not that many targets to go around. 2 fumbles were huge in this game. The opening kickoff by Chuba Hubbard, and then Robbie Anderson put 1 on the ground too. And fumbles are they're killers. I mean, they're any turnover is a killer, I guess. But it really hurts when you have those situations there. And Giants get a free 3 points, and guess what? That's the margin of difference in this game. Yeah,
I mean, Carolina fumbled on its first 2 possessions, and both of those set up the Giants, in extremely advantageous field position, and they came away with field goals on both drives. So initially, it looked like Carolina had survived a disastrous start. Easily could have been like 10 or 14 to nothing Giants, and Carolina is able to battle back into this game. It was tied at the half, but there's just, despite having like one of the best playmakers in the league in McCaffrey and a really good receiver in DJ Moore, I mean, this offense is struggling. And it's if you can't really move the ball against a Browns team that just allowed 31 points to the Jets, and you can't do it against this Giants team, it makes you worry for what's coming up next for Carolina. So obviously with McCaffrey, you got to ride it out, and it's a little bit disappointing, but still got over 100 yards on 15 carries. But, going up against the Saints next week, you get the Cardinals after that. Then it's the 49ers and the Rams and the Buccaneers. So not a lot of appealing matchups for the Carolina Panthers, really, until the end of October when you get the Falcons.
Yeah, and that Carolina Atlanta is not the definition of the word appealing to me either. So we'll see about that. Giants, I mean, they're on the struggle bus too right now. A second week in a row, Daniel Jones didn't look that great. 22 for 34, 176, 5.2 yards per attempt. Did have a touchdown pass, got sacked 3 times. He protected the ball at least, so he got that going for him. He didn't have a fumble sack, so getting a little better there. But Barkley only 3.4 yards per carry, didn't have any big plays. The longest was 16. That's as big as it gets. Richie James, your leading yards receiving receiver. David Sills, the 5th, 3 for 37. Sterling Shepard had 10 targets. I actually kind of low key like him going forward because of the volume. But you know who didn't? Kenny Golladay didn't show up at all on the stat sheet, and Kadarius Toney was 2 for 0, one 2-yard catch, one negative 2-yard catch. These are not the players you expected coming into this season.
Yeah, it's actually amazing if you just look at the box scores with no context, and someone told you that the Giants are somehow 2-0, you'd be like, what the hell is going on here? But that's the advantage, I guess, of getting Carolina in week 2. And I mean, they have 2 more winnable games coming up. Like, there's a world in which the New York Giants are 4-0. And it's really not all that far-fetched. By the way, they play the Monday night game against Dallas next week, so get fired up for that one. Richie James versus Noah Brown, I guess. Those are the 2 headliners. With Toney, I mean, he was a little injured coming into the game. His status was in question. So you do wonder if maybe they were limiting him a little bit. But Kenny Golladay, I mean, this situation, I don't know if Kenny Golladay is going to be on the roster.
He got 2 snaps. Two.
Well, there are reports that he cleaned out his locker and just left right after the game. So not really sure what's going to go on there. Wouldn't be surprised if they try to negotiate some sort of exit there. Contract wise, I don't know how difficult that would be. But I mean, at this point, I think you're almost operating as if he's just like not an option.
Yeah, it's very bizarre. I mean, they're kind of cleaning house. They're cleaning out the mess that was left behind. Sometimes you have to do that there. I mean, but it's David Sills, a second-year player that's 26 years old. It's not like he's some promising up-and-coming guy. He's getting targets. Richie James, cast off from the Niners. It's kind of like the Bears, not young quarterback and setting him up for failure. But who knows? I mean, the Giants are 2-0 though.
Hey, they're 2-0. Yeah. What failure? They're 2-0.
Exactly there. Let's move on. I don't want to talk about this game.
There's like no fantasy takeaways. We'd really be scraping the bottom of the barrel.
Hey, football fans, get your jerseys on, your tailgate snacks ready. That's right. NFL season is back, and so is your chance to score tickets with Vivid Seats. Giants fever, catch it. Don't download the Vivid Seats app or visit vividseats.com to see your team's schedule, compare tickets, and secure your spot in the stands. As the only ticketing company with a reward program, Vivid Seats is the winning app for NFL fans like you. Earn credit when you buy 10 tickets, then cash it in to catch more games all season long. With tickets from Vivid Seats, you'll go from watching the game to being a part of it. Go to vividseats.com or find us in the App Store to browse unbeatable seats. We'll see you in the stadium. All right, let's talk about another game here. Oh, wait, we got another Turgid Wood coming up here too. Bucks and the Saints. This was ugly until the fourth quarter.
It sure was. And we should probably start by saying Mike Evans has been suspended for next week already.
It's already come down.
Yeah, it's already come down. I'm sure there'll be some sort of appeal process, but I would imagine, given his history with this specific game and Marshawn Lattimore, I mean, I think this is their third full-on brawl over the last 3 or 4 years. We would imagine that Mike Evans will not be available for week 3. Pretty big game, by the way, against the Green Bay Packers. And Tampa Bay was also without Julio Jones and, of course, Chris Godwin in this game as well. So maybe could be without all 3 of their top receivers next week against Green Bay. But it showed, man. I mean, this Tampa offense did not look good against Dallas last week, and it looked very similar against New Orleans. I think if Jameis Winston plays a slightly better game, New Orleans is very much in this and potentially wins it. I mean, he was awful. Had some really bad interceptions that essentially killed any momentum that New Orleans was able to generate. Mark Ingram had a really bad fumble as well, was actually running the ball really well in place of Alvin Kamara, who was not available, and then fumbled deep in Buccaneers territory to put an end to another Saints would-be scoring drive. But yeah, not a lot
put the ball on the ground.
I mean, it was kind of a weird play too, where he made a nice catch on the sideline, wasn't touched. And then essentially the ground caused the fumble. And because he wasn't touched, Tampa Bay was able to recover that. So some fluky plays for sure for New Orleans, but very few fantasy takeaways here. I mean, with Brady, 2 touchdowns in 2 weeks, as someone who's rostering him on several teams, that's not ideal. We saw Fournette just repeatedly run into a wall in this game. I think New Orleans had a pretty good idea of what Tampa Bay was trying to do offensively. I mean, other than one really nice throw from Tom Brady to Brashad Perriman in the back of the end zone, it was a pretty pedestrian day yet again for this Bucs offense.
Yeah, absolutely. And they had Mike Edwards TD too. I mean, thing is, this was the compromised bowl. Both teams were just missing so many key players.
Yep.
Jameis is playing with 4 fractures in his back. I mean, and it showed. The Bucs defense was the highest scoring unit out there right now. I mean, they got the 3 picks, the 2 fumbles, 6 sacks, and a touchdown. I mean, that pretty much covers it there.
Yeah, I mean, Jameis threw picks on 3 straight possessions in the second half when the Saints were still a 1-score game. Yeah, and the pick 6 essentially that was the backbreaker. I mean, once that was, that put Tampa Bay up 20-3 with I think 5 minutes left, maybe even less than that in the fourth quarter. So that was essentially it. And then of course, the Saints go down and tack on what was ultimately a meaningless touchdown, but very quietly now 3 touchdowns for Michael Thomas in 2 weeks.
Yeah, he got 9 targets, 6 for 65. I liked seeing Olave there. Did you start Jarvis Landry in any of your 1,000 teams where you have him rostered?
I knew this was coming, and no, I did not. And shockingly,
right.
Jarvis Landry did not match his production from week 1, which I will go on the record and say I don't think he's going to match that again the rest of the year.
No, you probably won't. It'll probably take him 3 games to get up to that total, in fact. But 4 for 25. That's kind of what we expected from him on a regular basis there. Just exploited a Falcons team that has 2 solid cover corners, and Landry got the third that was less than solid, and he ate, and it worked out pretty well. Both these teams, they need to get healthy quick. Brady doesn't look great either. I mean, he did enough to get it done, but he was averaging 5.6 yards per attempt in his own right. He's trying to get rid of the ball quickly, clearly. He's only been sacked 3 times, but that offensive line's not great. Fournette didn't find him much room. He had 1 13-yard run, but 24 for 65. That's pretty ugly. Just a bad game. I mean, 2 good defenses. Some of that's, you got to give the defenses credit for taking advantage of that, but these guys need to get healthy and quick.
Yeah, defenses get credit, but I think it definitely seemed like 2 teams that were missing key playmakers. That's for sure. And I think it's a little bit poetic just given who he is, but I think Julio Jones is going to end up being a big, meaningful piece for this Buccaneers team. Like they really missed him compared to what he gave them in that Dallas game. So we'll be keeping a very close eye on both Julio and Chris Godwin this week ahead of that Green Bay game.
Yeah, and the thing is, Julio looked good in week 1, and then all of a sudden he went downward in practice into the game time decision, didn't play. And I think they're going to be out without Godwin for a while still. I know they remember we were both kind of like, I'm skeptical of their framing of everything here. Not as bad as we thought it was going to be. Okay, well then, when's he going to play? Well, we're not going to tell you that.
Yeah, it's like, well, the good news is he didn't re-tear his ACL, but the bad news is he's still injured and will likely miss multiple weeks. So, still not ideal. And obviously with Julio, we love him. Everybody wants him to be healthy, but, we're already going down that same track that we've been down time and time and time again in the past.
Would you consider picking up Brett Perriman? Not Brashad Perriman.
Yeah,
Brett Perriman, no, I would not consider.
No, I don't know if he's in the player pool. Maybe just for 1 week. I guess it depends what the outlook is on Chris Godwin. If we find out that he's maybe going to miss 3, 4, 5 games, then possibly there's room for Perriman. But with Evans, it's looking like it'll just be the 1 game that he'll miss. So after that, probably not. If Perriman doesn't have that 1 touchdown, I don't think we're really discussing this. It hasn't been a very good passing offense. That's the thing is, maybe we need to see it against a non-New Orleans, non-Dallas defense, especially with how Dallas played against Cincinnati. But it just doesn't seem to me like it's an offense that is going to be supportive of like 2 or 3 productive receivers.
No, probably not. I think one of the takeaways is defense is winning most of these battles right now. There are some teams that are functioning really well on offense, but there's a lot, I think, or at least early on in the season, the defenses are winning these battles. So at least that's my impression. I should probably do some stats to back that up. But
I actually have one for you. I saw Chris Towers, who does good work
for CBS.
Yep. So I know we work with him. Scoring is down 10% from the last 2 weeks of last season. So you're right. I mean, it certainly feels that way watching these games.
10% is a lot too, by the way.
It is.
That's a pretty significant chunk. All right. More fun game here. Commanders versus the Lions. Lions jumped them early. Commanders rallied late to put up good stats, but ultimately fell well short. The Lions good?
I don't know. The Lions to me feel like they're like Texas Tech or Oklahoma State or one of those teams in the Big 12 that tries to win every game like 54-51. They're tied with the Chiefs right now as the highest scoring team in the NFL. 35 in week 1, 36 yesterday against the Commanders. And Washington could not have played a worse first half in this game. Their drives in the first half were 3-and-out punt, 3-and-out punt, safety, 3-and-out punt, 3-and-out punt, punt. Literally did nothing whatsoever to help themselves, but got things going in the second half, much like last week. Carson Wentz threw touchdowns on 3 straight drives at one point, did mix a pick in there, but still ended up with another monster stat line. 337 yards, 3 touchdowns, 23 rushing yards as well. And once again, we saw all 3 of Jahan Dotson, Terry McLaurin, and Curtis Samuel all three of those guys were totally viable fantasy wise. McLaurin didn't get in the end zone, but we saw Jahan Dotson. He's now got 3 touchdowns through 2 games. Curtis Samuel got in the end zone again. We didn't see Samuel involved in the running game quite as much. Did have 1 carry for 21 yards, so that was semi-disappointing. But, they also have Antonio Gibson. They also have McKissick. So, I came out of this game, I guess, feeling pretty encouraged about Detroit. It looked like for a second there, they were maybe going to let the Commanders back into this game. But, this offense is just relentless. They've been as aggressive as any team over the first 8 quarters of the season. They are just trying to score touchdowns on every single drive. There's no game management. There's no running the clock. It is just big play after big play.
It is. It really is. Amon-Ra St. Brown. What a run he's on. We were kind of like, okay, that was great at the end of the year last year, but he certainly wasn't going at a price commensurate with what his production was at the end of the year last year. And he's out producing where his draft price right now. 9 for 116, 2 touchdowns, and 2 rushes for 68 yards, including a 58-yarder. Massive day there. DeAndre Swift was on a snap count, but it looked good when he was in there. I'm not worried about him. I think he's going to get more use in the long run there. It's not nice seeing Jamal Williams vulture back, but I don't think that's always going to be the case either. Detroit even had remember they failed to connect on downs, 4th and goal. I thought, it could have even been worse. Although I think after they got stopped on downs, they got the safety. So that's one of the added advantages when you go for it. And it was exactly when they got the safety. So that's one of the advantages you get when you're bold in the red zone. It's always a time and place. You don't do it like a minute left in the first half, but you do it when you have more time. And that's what they did. Goff didn't turn the ball over. 20 for 34, 4 touchdowns. Just a very efficient performance. Now that they have to go on the road at some point here, but they look good. They got 5 sacks. Hutchinson got 3 of those sacks. That's big to see him kind of your first round draft pick contributing like that. You love seeing that. A lot of good things coming out of Detroit. They got to be feeling pretty good today.
Yeah, I was going to bring up Hutchinson as well. He was fantastic. He was all over the field in the first half of this game. He looks like that's going to be a big-time hit at number 2 overall. Even Jeff Okudah, their first rounder from 2 years ago, had a kind of a rough rookie year, was banged up, but he looked good in this game. He's been much better through their first 2 weeks. But when's the last time we've talked about the Lions as having this high-flying offensive attack? It feels like it's been forever, but they're one of the most fun teams to watch in the league so far. And it feels like, we'll see what they do, when they start running into some better defensive units. But I think we thought the Eagles would be a pretty good defense. They put up 35 there. The Commanders, we'll see that they're at Minnesota next week. So I think, based on what we see from the Vikings tonight against Philly, maybe that'll be a better test. But so far, Amon-Ra St. Brown is on the short list of the biggest fantasy storylines of the first 2 weeks. You look at the top scoring receivers in PPR so far. It's Cooper Kupp number 1, it's Tyreek Hill number 2, and it's Amon-Ra St. Brown number 3.
Yep. The only negative was DJ Chark, 0 for 0, 4 targets in this one there. Some people felt comfortable starting him. Some people, being me, for instance, started him after a pretty good first game. Yeah. Just wasn't a part of it. Instead, we saw Josh Reynolds getting reps and targets, getting a touchdown. It's like, not happy about that one there. But no. Unfortunately, Chark, that's happened before in his career where he's disappeared from games. We'll move on to the next one here. But before we do that, though, a quick note from our final sponsor here. And that sponsor happens to be Monkey Knife Fight. Football is officially back on Monkey Knife Fight with all the NFL action that you're looking for. And if college football is more your speed, they've got plenty of that too. On Monkey Knife Fight, there's no sharks, no salary caps, and no math. It's just easy to play, easy to win, daily fantasy player props. Join now at monkeyknifefight.com and you'll get your first game free. Then use promo code RWNFL to get your first deposit matched up instantly to $100, instantly up to $100. So what are you waiting for? Join Monkey Knife Fight today. All right, Nick and I are breaking down the week that was in week 2. That covers the rest of the early slate. Let's jump on to Niners and Seahawks. Obvious storyline, unfortunately, is Trey Lance getting hurt. Massive, ugly injury there. Jimmy Garoppolo is now the starter. Lance is out for the season. Huge, game-changing injury for the Niners.
Yeah, I mean, props to Trey Lance for handling that with the composure of somebody who really didn't seem injured at all. It was pretty insane. If I broke my ankle, I would not be that calm. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
But yeah, in some ways it's like weirdly poetic, I guess, that, it's as soon as they decided to keep Garoppolo on the roster, you knew this was going to be a storyline. And then, of course, 2 weeks later, here he is now, likely going to start the rest of the year for the San Francisco 49ers. They essentially ruled out Trey Lance right away. It kind of similar, it feels like, to that injury that Dak suffered a few years ago, although probably a little more severe. I believe Dak was able to recover more quickly than Lance's projected timetable. But all in all, I don't know that this really changes my opinion of the 49ers. I mean, we certainly saw the play calling dramatically change right away. They went to a little more aggressive passing attack as soon as Garoppolo came in, and were able to run the ball a bunch once the game got out of hand in the second half. But long term, I still, it doesn't really change like the Super Bowl type of ceiling for me with San Francisco. But it's going to delay yet another year where we still don't know if Trey Lance is good. Like the same questions that we had about Trey Lance coming into this season, the same questions we were asking 2 days ago about Trey Lance, we're going to be asking in September of 2023. The evaluation period now is just delayed another year.
Yeah, and contractually, it's going to delay Lance for another year in terms of getting that extension too, almost certainly. It changes the offense too. All those RPOs are gone. We still got, Debo's going to get a lot of carries, 4 for 53 yesterday as far as that goes. But you're going to get a lot more straight carries from the running backs. Jeff Wilson had 18 for 84 yesterday. Tyrion Davis-Price wasn't very efficient, but he got 14 carries for 33 yards. Of course, Garoppolo had a QB sneak touchdown, and Juszczyk had a goal line touchdown too. Wilson did get carries in the red zone though, so he's still like the goal line back you're going to use. But I think Wilson benefits some from this, unfortunately, in a weird sort of way. Passing game, we'll see. I mean, it might hurt Ayuk. Now, I will say this: Jimmy G looked like he had more zip on his ball than he did last year, because remember, he had shoulder surgery in the offseason.
Jimmy looked great, I thought. I mean, Seattle was overmatched in this game. This was one where I know in our staff picks column, I love Seattle covering. I thought the number was way too big. As it turns out, the odds makers knew what they were doing with that one. And Seattle just came out completely flat in this game and couldn't really get anything going. But I thought Jimmy looked great. He looked ready. Right away, my first thought was like, wait, wasn't he not even with the team? It kind of felt like they were keeping him away, wasn't super involved during training camp. So I think it was fair to wonder what he would look like, but he looked like a guy who was prepared to step in.
Well, we saw what Nate Sudfeld looked like. And I think they're like, oh, shoot, we got to get someone better here. And that turned out to be prescient. I don't know if that was by design or if it's just that they lucked into that decision, but they need him now big time. So we'll see how that goes going forward. Seattle, this is the Seattle that we thought that they would be at. The week one, they had that big crowd-filled revenge game boost. Got to remember in the second half, they were shut out in that win over the Broncos. They just held on for dear life in the second half. Geno Smith actually was 24 for 30, but they were all short. He was pressured a lot. You got one pick. Wasn't the worst pick thrown by a Seattle player that game. DJ Dallas threw that one play. Nice play call, guys, by the way. I don't know. Hey, let's be tricky. But yeah, that was even if he had had gotten a little bit more loft on the throw, was going to be picked off by the next guy. I mean, it was such a bad decision. Yeah. This is why you don't put players in that position. The running backs they're destroyed now. Penny was 6 for 15. Kenneth Walker 4 for 10. I mean, the fact that they got Homer in that backfield, they've got like these 3 running back sets all the time. What is this, Nebraska in the 70s? Yeah. Come on. This is not a fun offense to watch. Now, it was raining. The game was in the muck. They were trailing the whole time. They got down early. So their only points came though on a blocked field goal. Tyler Lockett actually had a pretty good game after a first game where he was barely targeted. 9 for 107. DK only had 6 targets in this one. It's going to be a pretty ugly offensive season for Seattle this year.
Yeah, I think you said it as like, this is the type of performance we're going to see a little more consistently than what we saw in week one. Maybe Seattle needs to create some sort of like spiteful rivalry for each game, because they just look like a much different team in week one. The level of intensity and the preparedness was notably different. I mean, they were so flat in this first half, and you're going up against a team that its starting quarterback broke his ankle like a few minutes into the game. If anything, you think that the 49ers are the team that would have the life sucked out of them, and Seattle was just completely unable to capitalize on San Francisco being without Trey Lance. And obviously they're in a unique situation as far as who's relieving him. Normally it's a much bigger downgrade going to a backup quarterback. But yeah, the Seattle offense was ugly. I'm definitely worried about Metcalf. This game felt pretty similar to last week for him, where everything's difficult. Some of the lines might end up looking okay, but he's not going to have the deep ball opportunities, I think, especially that he was able to feast on over the last couple of years with Russell Wilson. So it's going to be a bit of a slog with Metcalf, but major bounce back from Tyler Lockett. That's for sure. I still think, though, it could be very up and down.
I was going to say, it's not bankable.
Yeah, it's not bankable. There are some weeks where you just don't have a choice and you have to throw him in there, but I wouldn't be feeling great about it.
Yep. Let's move on to Atlanta and the Rams. Nick, Shu and I are in a survivor pool where we actually used the Ravens last week. So we actually survived the carnage that was week 1. We went Rams this week, and I was thinking, okay, we nailed this pick.
Yep.
It was 21-3, then it was 28-3 against the Falcons. Interesting number there. And then the Stafford was getting sloppy. Cooper Kupp puts the ball on the ground. They suffer a block punt touchdown. This game was unduly close, really scary at the end there. After the Kupp fumble, I'm like, they're really going to do this. They're going to fall behind. I'm hoping that the Rams can turn around and score.
Yep.
Let's talk about the good stuff first. I mean, they were moving the ball really readily early on. Stafford did throw for 272 and 3 touchdowns. He was only sacked one time. Cooper Kupp did his thing. Allen Robinson actually scored. Higbee went 7 for 71, so he kind of reprised week 1 a little bit there. Cam Akers saw the field early. Wasn't great, but there's some things they did right in this game. Obviously, they won.
Well, they should. I mean, this should have been a much different result. For one, Atlanta had a chance to win this game, and Mariota threw a pretty bad pick deep in Rams territory. I mean, like you said, it wasn't only that they had an opportunity to win. I mean, they were like 30 yards from the end zone and very easily could have capped this one off. But for most of the afternoon, it looked like the Rams were going to cruise to like a 15 to 20 point victory. Matthew Stafford, to me, it just looks shaky. I know he had the 3 touchdowns. Like he still has three or four throws per game where you're just like, wow, man, like this guy, I understand, why he led this team to the Super Bowl, but then he also has 3 or 4 throws per game where you're like, good quarterbacks don't make these throws. Like he already has 5 picks through 2 games, and his picks are head scratchers. They are picks that great quarterbacks do not throw. But Cooper Kupp, other than the fumble, was amazing yet again in this game. Had an incredible touchdown catch early on. Finished with 2 touchdowns. Allen Robinson should have had another touchdown. It was called off. There was kind of a weird, they even replayed it, and the play was called back due to an injury timeout, but nobody blew the whistle until the play had almost concluded. There's a lot of confusion there. So it was a really nice kind of heads up play by the Rams to try to do a quick snap near the goal line. Should have been a second touchdown for Robinson, but either way,
I'm all keenly aware of that one there. Having a lot of exposure to Robinson, you feel snake bit on that, but at least he got the other one there too.
Yeah, nice bounce back for him. Got that first touchdown early. That was kind of a nice sigh of relief. And Cam Akers, it was not a banner day. 15 for 44, but at least the workload was there, because that was the big concern I think in week 1 was not only that Akers didn't give you anything, it was that he wasn't on the field for the first 2 series, and just seemed like it was he was dramatically out of favor compared to Henderson.
Right.
And the workload in this game didn't really belie that.
Right. And he actually had more carries than Henderson, and Henderson didn't have any targets. So, things are now on a full-on timeshare, and it could be even more in favor of Akers going forward. I wouldn't be surprised on that. On the Atlanta side, are you freaking out about Kyle Pitts?
I only have him, I think, in 1 league. So in that league, I'm not happy about it. It's 2 weeks for this, and Arthur Smith after the game basically just declining to talk about it, dismissing it, not really acknowledging that he has a generational talent at tight end, and is not really using him as such. So to me, that's what's a little more concerning. You kind of like to hear him say, we're going to get some more packages for Pitts. It was more like, hey, shut up. I'm the coach. Don't worry about it.
Don't question my genius.
Yeah, it was my
brilliance. We're trying. This isn't a fantasy league. We're trying to win games.
That's the last thing you want to hear as someone who's in a fantasy league.
Yeah.
But 3 targets for Kyle Pitts, and there's some obvious situations where, all right, you're in the red zone. You're throwing these jump balls basically to Kadero Hodge and Olamide Zaccheaus. It's you have the guy for these. Why are you not using him? So not panicking, but it's concerning for sure. I mean, it'd be one thing if he had 2 for 19, but he was targeted 8 times and they just couldn't hook up, whatever. But 3 targets in a game where Marcus Mariota, he did only throw it 26 times, I guess, if you want to look at that as a positive. But yeah, I mean, it's a little strange. But I guess the other side of this is that Drake London, 8 for 86 and a touchdown on 12 targets.
Yeah. And I think what's happening is teams are preparing for Pitts. And they're okay. You're a receiver. We'll treat you like a receiver. We'll bracket you. We'll put 2 guys on you.
Yep.
And they got to figure out how to beat that, but they haven't done so yet. Drake London looks the part too. I mean, it's not just the volume and the results, but how he's doing. He's beating some good players. He's holding on to some tough catches. He looks great. He really looks good.
Yeah, absolutely. Looks more ready than I expected. He's been fantastic through these first 2 weeks, and he's a big part of the reason that Atlanta probably should have won that game against New Orleans in week 1. And even though they were trailing by a ton for most of this game, you look at the final score, losing by 4 to the Rams on the road. That's not a bad result for a team that, I think we expected to be 0-2, but it's been a hell of a lot more competitive than we thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on. In leagues where I didn't use the Rams in my existing survivor pools, I used the Broncos. Boy, am I glad to get them done and over with. They look terrible. I mean, I'm piling on. Everybody, single person on Twitter was just having a field day ripping on Nathaniel Hackett and Russell Wilson, who similarly looks terrible. But this team doesn't have their stuff together. I mean, they're like all these delay games to the point where their own fans are counting down the play clock for them. So they realize, I mean, that's when your fan base turns on you in your first home game, when you're so excited about this quarterback and they lay such an egg against the Texans. I mean, if it weren't for what happened last week, I'd be willing to suggest, hey, maybe this Texans defense is way better than we're giving them credit for. And we did see that they actually did a pretty decent job against the Colts for 3 quarters. But man, this is just ugly. Winning ugly here.
I think if the Broncos play almost any other team in the league, maybe any other team in the league, they lose this game. I think they benefited from Houston just not being a very talented team, from Houston not being able to execute in similar situations. I mean, the Texans were 2 of 13 on 3rd down in this game. They were 1 of 3 on 4th down. Denver 3 of 12 on 3rd down. I mean, I think the biggest thing is they have like the yips. Nathaniel Hackett has the yips in the red zone. Like when they approach anything close to a touchdown, he just doesn't know what to do. And, like you said, it does feel like piling on, but we've seen a lot of bad coaches come through the NFL. I don't think I can remember a situation where, I'm not saying Hackett is like a full-on bad coach, but has anybody been less prepared or just seemed like more frazzled than Nathaniel Hackett through 2 games? Like he just seems totally overmatched from a decision-making standpoint.
It seems like it. Doesn't help that Jerry Jeudy left this game early. They're already down Tim Patrick. KJ Hamler didn't play this game. They're missing, all receivers not named Cortland Sutton, who got his 7 for 122. But they missed that. They tried to hook up with the backs a couple of times. Williams had 4 targets, but only 1 catch. I mean, they're lacking some talent in the receiving core. Albert O got shut out. But they were doing like running plays for Andrew Beck. I mean,
on 3rd down.
Yeah.
That was crazy. That was one of the craziest play calls I've ever seen in that situation, especially because that was far enough into the game where they were already getting booed on 3rd down for their calls. And then you run that. I mean, I
punted it away after that too.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. They basically did like the exact same scenario as last week where they couldn't decide if they wanted to go for it or they wanted to kick. And by the time that decision, was made, it was too late. You had to take a delay a game. And that's when the boos really started. I mean, they were getting booed on pretty much every offensive possession deep into the second half. And even the touchdown, which went to Eric Sobert. I'm sure everybody had him starting in a bunch of leagues. Like even that one felt like, man,
the 4th string tight end. Yeah. But that's also kind of a function of all the injuries they had.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's Tyreek Cleveland was the only other player other than Cortland Sutton to have multiple receptions in this game. I mean, Russell Wilson was 6 of 20 passing at one point early in the second half. So, I mean, this was, if you didn't watch the game, it was as ugly as the box score implies.
Yeah. And if you didn't watch the game, congratulations on that. Texans side of things. Remember, I'm old enough to remember when Rex Burkhead got more carries and snaps than Dameon Pierce, and everybody freaked out. Pierce was 15 for 69. He actually looked pretty good at times. 4.6 yards per carries. Only 1 target in the passing game. And I think they struggled in short yardage situations, but he did have 1 big 4th down conversion late in that game. They couldn't punch in the end zone. Davis Mills couldn't do a whole lot. Brandon Cooks was pretty well shut down. 10 targets, 4 for 54. I mean, that's a lot of targets to get 54 yards. Same thing with Nico Collins had 9 targets in this one for 58 yards. So they didn't, when they did connect, they actually did some stuff, but they didn't connect a lot.
Yeah, and I'm hesitant to say this was like a great game by the Denver defense. I mean, I guess it was, but to me, it just, it just felt like Houston couldn't do a whole lot. I didn't feel like this was a dominant performance by a Denver defense that led up a bunch of points to Seattle in the first half last week.
No turnovers.
They're without Justin Simmons. Patrick Surtain got banged up in this game, so some more injuries to monitor for a team that certainly does not need that. But I still have no idea what to think about this Denver team. And, would they get I think they play Sunday night against the Niners next week. So that's going to tell us a lot. They get the Raiders after that. But that Seattle game was just such a unique one-off, given everything that's going on around it. And then the Texans, for all we know, they might be the worst team in the league. We're not even sure on that yet. So the Broncos could have easily lost this game. They could easily be 0-2. I think they're lucky that they had the Texans on the schedule in week 2, because I don't think they were prepared to beat 95% of the NFL with how they
prepared. To the operative term too. 100%. They look completely utterly unprepared. That was the ugly part about that. What the heck happened in Arizona and the Raiders? How did the Raiders collapse so badly? Up 20-0 at halftime. They just went into a shell in the second half. Only scored 3 points in the second half. Renfrow put the ball on the ground twice. The second time for the fumble 6 in overtime. But there's a lot of things that went wrong with this. How does Devontae Adams get 2 catches? And I guess the Cardinals secondary, they got shredded the week before. Just absolutely shredded.
Yeah. I mean, the Raiders, I think this is the most disappointing blown lead. I think the Jets coming back on the Browns is probably like the most statistically improbable of the blown leads that we saw in the early window. And obviously, Baltimore blowing that game to Miami, that was just fireworks all over the place. But this was like the saddest one, because it was just a slow bleed out for the Raiders. And you just kind of sensed it, that the offense after halftime just had nothing, had no punch whatsoever. They came out, they went 3 and out, allowed a really long 11-play touchdown drive to Arizona, came back, tacked on a field goal. At that point, you're still feeling pretty good if you're Vegas. You're up 23-7 at the end of the third quarter. You then force a huge stop on a 4th down on the Cardinals' ensuing drive, and you think, okay, we're good.
Yeah.
What you can't do there is go 3 and out and burn 20 seconds off the clock. That to me was just unconscionable. Horrible play calling. And then from then on, they could not get off the field. They could not get off the field. There was the long, the Kyler Murray experience.
The 20-second 2-point conversion. Yeah.
I saw somebody say he ran over 80 yards in that play. I don't know how you just kind of let him. He essentially walked his way into the end zone by the end of it. But it just reminded me, I thought the Raiders were going to be a better team this year. I thought they could maybe finally take that next step. This was a classic 2021 Raiders game. It was just that the defense just could not get off the field when it needed to. And, when you need Derek Carr to make a play, it seems like he's kind of a front runner. In the first half when things are going well, everything's great. When you say, hey, we need you to go down and get a score here to end this game, he couldn't do it.
Yeah, I was half wrong about the AFC West. I was wrong because I touted the Broncos to be a real contender in this division. And that's looking like that's not aging very well. But I did say to fade the Raiders, and they're 0-2 now. I mean, they look good for a half. They looked really good in the first half.
Yeah.
And James Conner gets hurt, although they said it's not going to be a severe injury, but not a severe injury does not mean he's okay either. So we'll see about that. But I understand, Renfrow fumbled, but the problem started well before Renfrow's fumbles. I mean, the fact is it never should have been in that position in the first place. Raider, I don't trust the Raiders defense. I think that's part of it there. And I think their offensive line isn't very good. So that's also a problem.
Yeah. Raiders defense is terrible. Max Crosby, they could have ended the game. Max Crosby had Kyler Murray sacked. I mean, he had his full body wrapped around him and just didn't finish the play. And, Murray able to escape there. I mean, just look at the Cardinals' last drive, 18 plays. Like how many opportunities you had to get off the field when the team has an 18-play drive. There was a questionable penalty in there on a defensive holding that was pretty big. I think that was on a 4th down. But then you give up the touchdown and you give up the 2-point. I mean, it's just a comedy of errors by that defense. And then, of course, like you said, the back-to-back fumbles by somebody who, I think Hunter Renfrow, you think of him as one of the best ball security receivers in the league, but puts the ball on the ground. Luckily, they recover the first one. And then 2 plays later, a game-losing fumble when it looked like Vegas was at least on the move to set up what would have likely been a long field goal attempt.
Exactly right. Yeah. Connor got hurt, injured his ankle. Darrell Williams, 8 for 59 and a touchdown. Looked pretty good. Benjamin was getting third downs after the Connor injury. He was 8 for 31. He also had 4 targets in the passing game. Williams had 3 of his own. I mean, and also, it's because Kyler threw it 49 times too. So as would be fitting of a team that's coming back, they ran a hell of a lot more plays than the Raiders. So the Raiders defense had to be gassed by the end of the game.
Yep. Yeah. Again, Raiders defense was just horrendous down the stretch of this game. And that was a big part too of, Derek Carr had a big first half. We saw Devontae Adams get a short touchdown, but they just weren't on the field. They weren't on the field that much in the second half. And when they were, it was poor play calling, inability to control the clock whatsoever. Looking at that running back situation in Arizona, Rappaport said this morning that James Conner has avoided a serious injury, could still miss a game or two in the short term. That doesn't mean he's just fine going forward. I think they get the Rams next week. If he doesn't play, we saw Williams and Benjamin split snaps, I should say, almost completely evenly. And they split carries evenly. They split targets evenly. They split routes run evenly. So picking between those two, if we get to that situation in week 3, could be a little dicey.
Yeah. Small lean for Williams. For me, this one, I feel like it's kind of like the Jacksonville timeshare minus the dynamic play of each back. But, I think they could be useful in the right context. Finally, Bears, Packers. Packers predictably bounced back in week 2 and squashed the Bears. This one was, in the first quarter was a little dicey. Bears looked like they were playing out a little bit there. They were getting pressure on Rodgers, sacked him a couple of times, got ahead 7-3, and then Green Bay said, okay, shoe fly, and they swat him away. Second half was kind of a drudge, but the running game looked phenomenal for the Packers yesterday. Yeah. Aaron Jones did his thing. Pretty good performance for the Packers there.
I think this was pretty much exactly the game that I expected to see from Green Bay. I felt like there was no chance that they were losing this game, but I also didn't expect them to come out and win like 45-10. I don't think they have that kind of firepower this year.
I agree.
Make that type of statement on the offensive end. But yeah, the defense looked good. Other than that initial drive where the Bears always seem to have one drive like that against the Packers. Sometimes it comes early, sometimes it comes late. But after that, things tightened up. Amazing interception by Jair Alexander on Justin Fields late in that game. The amount of ground that he covered on that one, but just an overmatched Bears offense. I think this is a little more what we expected. Although David Montgomery, 122 yards on just 15 carries, he had himself a pretty nice night. But the Packers offensively, we knew Aaron Jones was going to be way more involved after having only 8 touches last week. He gets 18 touches in this game. He looked fantastic. Like you said, Dylan looked great. The black mark, I think, on the offense is that weird fumbled exchange in the second half when they were really rolling at that point. And likely would have put up a few more points. But this is the Packers team that I think I kind of expect to see this year. It's a team that's going to win ugly. They're not going to be keeping their foot on the gas on offense. If they get a lead against a bad team, they're just happy to kind of alternate Jones and Dylan and run as much clock as they need. This is a second half that flew by because both teams were just running the ball seemingly every snap.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's befitting a Packers game where they always run the play clock low. There weren't a lot of plays in this one here. The Bears ran 41 plays. 41. Yeah. Fields threw the ball 11 times. Now, some of that's because he was under pressure a lot, so he had to pull the ball down and run. He got sacked 3 times. 8 carries for Fields, but it's also
got stuffed at the goal line on what was, in my opinion, kind of looked like a touchdown, but was not. It was. It's you got to give props, I guess, to the Packers defense, but I think this is more about just some kind of general ineptitude for the Bears. But Sammy Watkins also a little more involved. I know he led the Packers receivers in snaps last week, but did almost nothing.
Right.
Had a long 55-yarder in this one. That's carrying a lot of the water for him in that 3 for 93. But we also saw Lazard make his debut and get in the end zone too on a really nice play where he kind of acted like he was blocking and then turned it into a quick slant.
Yeah, really done. No pass catcher on either side of the ball had more than 4 targets in this game. I guess in the Bears case, when you only throw it 11 times, they were down big too at halftime. The Bears. Ugh. I mean, yeah, I had someone ask me if Darnell Mooney is a drop. Was it you? Or
I don't think.
no, I
We
think it was
talked about it
Alan
on the
that maybe is
show.
asking it.
Yeah, I think we talked about him not as a drop, but like, I mean, are you even comfortable starting him at this point? Like playing the Bears feels like you're playing like a service academy.
Yeah, Cole Kmet shut out 2 weeks in a row now.
Yep.
I remember. I'm old enough to remember when I was talking about him as a nice breakout tight end, and boy, he didn't. He's definitely not that. Just really lacking weapons on offense. The Bears are. We knew this coming in. We knew this is a bad offensive line. All those things came to fruition. Although Montgomery looked really good, 15 for 122. I mean, he was not the problem there at all. They were able to run the ball. Khalil Herbert was 4 for 38, so he ran the ball well too.
Yeah, he did. That's the concern, I think, if you're the Packers, giving up that many rushing yards to a team that clearly had no passing game whatsoever. I mean, you kind of knew what was coming every time, and they still were able to bully that Packers defensive line around a little bit. But I still feel like we don't know a ton about Green Bay. I think we're going to know more next week after they play at Tampa. Although, again, this could be a Tampa team that's pretty depleted. So, with the Patriots and the Giants and the Jets and the Commanders coming up after that, it feels like it might be a while until we truly know just what the ceiling is for this Packers team. It might be all the way till the end of October when they play at Buffalo.
Yep. I think you're right about that. So, yeah, unfortunately, we know what the Bears ceiling is. It's not great.
Yes, we do.
It
is not high. It is not high.
I'd put them in the conversation for bottom team along with Houston there.
I think so. I think, obviously they have a win. So, that's
in a monsoon.
Doing a lot. Yeah, right. Exactly. And, Atlanta's 0-2, Carolina's 0-2, and Carolina's
Bengals are 0-2.
Bengals are 0-2. I didn't want to say it, but that is in fact the case. They are. Even Carolina to me has shown like at least a little more competency or a little more explosion. The ability to throw the ball, for example, is something that's pretty big in the modern NFL. So, credit to the Bears for finding a way to win in week 1, but it might be a while until they see another one of those.
Yeah, Carolina Bears would be an ugly game to watch for sure.
Well, by the way, we're in luck. We get Bears Texans next week. So
good.
There it is. Good. Can't wait for that.
I'll put that on the rewatch list now. High on the list there. Any other comments before we sign off?
Not too much, man. I think going game by game, it's tough to miss anything. Yeah. I mean, obviously, I'm on cloud 9 with how Trevor Lawrence looked in that game. I think I will say the only thing is that a lot of it felt kind of scripted. It was a lot of just kind of take the easy throw. But look, if you can keep doing that, that's fantastic. I guess the only thing would be if we kind of want to rewind all the way back to Thursday. I'm sure this has been covered on some of our pods already, but just have any overarching takeaways from Chiefs Chargers?
I'm just amazed that Herbert was able to make that throw late. I think we might. They say he's probably not going to miss a game, but we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if he misses time. Mahomes told the truth when he said he's going to spread it around. I know you're heavy into Juju this year. You couldn't have been happy with that.
No, I was not. Spreading it around has meant more Justin Watson, I think, than we expected. A little more Noah Gray than we expected. So, that was not a great showing for Juju. I thought he looked good in week 1, but Mahomes wasn't lying, man. I think some of that stuff you kind of just throw out because it seems like coach speak or quarterback speak or whatever you want to call it. But that's what we've seen so far. And I did feel like the Chargers deserved to win that game. The pick 6 was unconscionable. Just an unbelievable play call. I do feel like there's some like Zach Taylor, Brandon Staley, kind of same brain going on where sometimes I just question what those guys are thinking with some of the talent that they have on those teams. But as somebody who was back at the Chargers in that game, it was frustrating to watch. But I mean, that throw from Mahomes to Watson for the touchdown, I mean, that was unbelievable. Wild to see JC Jackson get beat by Justin Watson on that play, but an unreal throw from Mahomes to uncork that one on the run.
I will say Mahomes and the Chiefs got lucky on the overturned INT. I think that was a big game-changing call.
I think it was the right call, but Mahomes had five plays that could have been picks, and none of them turned into interceptions. And Herbert had one that, of course, went 100 yards the other way. But that's how it goes for Mahomes, man. It feels like nobody gets those kind of breaks more than Mahomes.
Yeah, you make your breaks, right? I guess, or you get a little lucky too along the way. They have some things to work on for sure. Edwards-Helaire looks good. Pacheco is only in early, and he's not in on passing downs. It's definitely McKinnon that's the passing downs back. So
I
think if you're looking for a second Casey back, it's McKinnon at this point in time.
I think so. Yeah. Again, Pacheco, if you look at the week 1 box score, it looks like he's the guy, but I wouldn't be messing around with that quite yet. Only other note for me on this game is that we got the Mike Williams bounce back in a major
we did.
I think that could not have gone better with Keenan Allen out.
100%. That touchdown reception was a thing of beauty. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Such a good catch. All right, that's going to wrap it up. Thanks, everybody, for jumping in on the chat. Love seeing everybody active there. Thanks for listening in, tuning in. We got Jake and Joe tomorrow with a lot of free agent talk, so tune in for that. Thanks for listening to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Take care.